Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Colleen Meyer, and welcome to Lafaya Way Live. I will be your moderator today. So if you have any questions for Lafaya or Dr. Meyer, you can please put that in the comment sections, and we'll address your question. And we go through the next 30 minutes. And everybody knows Lafaya Mitchell of the Lafaya Way. She is a marriage and family therapist, author, speaker, and she has 3 books out, the Lafaya Way series. Check them out on Amazon. And her specialty is working with hypersensitive kids, teens, and adults. And Dr. Bauer, she is amazing. You guys, you're going to love her. Let me tell you a little bit about her before we get started. She is an MD. She has a master's of public health, and she's a fellow of the American Academy. She's a blogger, a girlologist. That's going to be interesting to find out what that is. A speaker and consultant and creator of Let's Talk Kids Health, LLC. Lafaya, you have the floor.
All right. Okay. So now we have to start with the most important question for me now that I heard about this girlologist piece. Now tell us a little bit about this girl, you're being a girlologist. I'd love to hear more.
Yes, of course. So, being a girlologist, that means that I represent the brand Girlology that was started by doctors Trish Hutchinson and Melissa Holmes, known as Girlology. And it's all about promoting kids and parents' communication about the exciting changes that are happening in their bodies. So it's not just a program for girls, but also boys. And, it's to promote that two-way communication, to make it, exciting, but demystifying it, and then also making sure that parents are just a part of that essential conversation. And so being a girlologist, I'm the only one so far in Indiana. So that means that I bring these programming live to folks in the state.
Oh, that's so awesome. So making the conversation about bodies more comfortable.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, because I was like, and our theme this month is women, and I want to say girls and ADHD. Mm-hmm. So, I'm all about the girl power. So anything with girl in it, I love. So that's just so exciting to hear. Now, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about a couple of things that I was looking into. I see here that you have a blog going. Can you tell us a little bit about what topics you tend to speak about there in your blog?
Yes. So let me tell you a little bit about my blog. My blog is called Let's Talk Kids Health. And that's actually a play on words because, as you know, I also teach parenting classes. And one of the commands that we sort of tell parents to be wary of is the let's command. Because especially if you tell that to a preschooler, and you say, let's clean up the toys, and you just sit there, they're going to be like, hey, what are you doing? So we always try to tell parents, don't use that let's command unless you are going to be involved. So my blog represents a play on words because I want everybody to talk about behavioral health, family wellness, and parenting, to demystify it, and whether that be between parent and child, families and pediatricians or providers, as well as everybody in the community, because again, mental health issues are an important thing to just talk about and identify early.
Okay, so now your background, you're an MD, and
Yes.
And what was your particular specialty area? Is it pediatric?
It is. So, did I always know that I wanted to be a pediatrician? No, actually, I wanted to be an elementary education school major. My first job was as a teacher's aide, when I was 15 and during summer school, and I just fell in love with these kids, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to work with kids. So obviously, I thought about being a teacher. Well, being a first generation Filipino American, my mom was a nurse, so she was like, no, you need to be a nurse. So I thought about that. I thought about science, and then I really liked psychology. So I just thought about it, kids, science, psychology. Then I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll go to medical school. So I just knew as soon as I made that decision, pediatrics was the way to go. And I love working with kids. I love working with the families. It's all about prevention. And because I get to nurture that relationship from birth, through 21, 22, I really just get to see this beautiful relationship and the positive parent-child interactions over time. So I am a pediatrician by training, but then I specialized in behavioral pediatrics. So I see a lot of kids with ADHD, anxiety, depression, parenting problems, and school issues.
That is so awesome. I feel like your particular specialty area is a little, maybe a little rare, because I think that most, they can go into pediatrics without really considering that behavioral side, which
Yes.
this is awesome. How have I not met you? No, no. So this is exciting. Have you found that what you do and kind of how you really super specialize in this really special area? Have you found that you don't find many other doctors doing the same?
Well, so I'm glad you brought that up. When I was training in San Diego back in 2004, yeah, 2003, 2004. Sorry, I had to think about that. Um, my mentor at the time was actually being grandfathered into sitting for the board. So it was becoming a new board certified specialty where they decided not just focusing on pediatrics, but specifically development and behavior. So there is a fellowship for pediatrics. For this specialty. There's not a lot of us, and there's certainly a shortage because there are a lot of us in the field that are, retiring soon and not a lot going into it. So, a lot of times we work with, different interdisciplinary members with the schools. So I just love it because it's more of a team-based specialty.
Oh my goodness, that sounds so wonderful. Now, I just have to say now, and this is not a knock on doctors, but most of the time, I don't really hear a lot of that. A lot of,
I know.
excitement about team oriented. I don't hear a lot about, and I don't know if I've ever heard about someone who's gone from wanting to be a teacher to becoming, that's quite a journey. So
Yeah, well,
that's exciting.
yeah, well, and actually, pediatrics, we do a lot of teaching, so it just was a natural fit, and again, like I said, it's more prevention focused, strength based, so I'm all about that. I'm all about like finding what people are doing well and really kind of bolstering that.
Well, I think I'm going to move to Indiana so that we can, we can work together.
I would love that.
I've been in this field for 20 years, and I tell you, I've never met any docs, and not again, no knocks against them, but I've never met any docs with this particular specialty, and it's so much needed, so much needed. Like a lot of times, we have to almost convince them, hey, the behavioral piece is important. But no, this is awesome. Okay, so now I also, just in my research, I was looking, kind of looking at some of the things that you're doing, which sounds absolutely wonderful, everything you're doing. But can you talk to us a little bit about your Teach Me ADHD series?
Oh, I am so excited to talk to you about that. So, as you know, I see a lot of kids with ADHD, and part of the things that pediatricians are really doing is because they see so many kids, and they're oftentimes the front lines to identify these kids. Whether it's the parents got a phone call from the school and started talking to the teacher who started noticing things, or they may have started thinking and seeing things that were a little bit worrisome. So they bring it up to the pediatrician. And a lot of pediatricians now feel more comfortable identifying ADHD. However, because traditional pediatrics practices are very busy and each visit is 15, 20 minutes and they see a ton of kids. Shout out to the primary care pediatricians out there because, it's a hard job. But, other than maybe being able to identify and prescribe medications, the other parts of the treatment are so essential, which is behavioral therapy, parenting support, school accommodations, and self-care, right? And so there's only so much time that general pediatricians can do to really fully address ADHD in that comprehensive manner. They want to, but just the structure of the practice oftentimes makes it difficult. So they have to refer out to psychologists, therapists, school counselors, tutors, all of that. However, as you know, it's really hard for families to navigate lots of different appointments, right? And to really they want to do what they can. However, it's just hard, we're all busy. And so one of the things that I noticed in my practice was when I was teaching residents how to do this was, we would often make referrals when I used to work in academia, make referrals to families after we made a diagnosis to then start therapy, to do parenting support. And really that's where things got lost. I mean, sometimes the schedules were just the long wait lists, they weren't taking insurance, all of those different barriers. When COVID hit, I just, started thinking about how to really help families in this time of need because of the need to socially distance. Before COVID, I had actually already started the program called Teach, Tailoring Education for ADHD and Children's Health, when I was in academia. And it's basically a group visit model for parents when they check into the PEDS clinic. And it's a 90-minute appointment instead of the 30 minutes. And it invites a small group of families. So I had a parent curriculum and a child curriculum, and we would see them separately. But that just takes a lot of planning and appointment time, right? But we did publish, some papers on that. We did several studies, and we did it in several clinics, which was very great. And a lot of families really loved that group aspect. But because of COVID, I just decided, well, you know what? I'm going to mash those things together, those elements together. And Teach Me ADHD is now an interactive Zoom class, which is 8 weeks in length. And it's for kids who have ADHD, ages 8 to 12. And they take this class together with their parent. I've infused like a detective theme and family missions, and I'm headquarters. So it's all about onboarding parents and kids together so that they learn about ADHD, the ADHD brain, and also along the way, sort of those skills to begin talking to each other, noticing strengths, having a common language, not being scared about ADHD. We teach that ADHD is not good or bad, it just is. Yes. And it's really their superpower, and we want the kids to embrace that. And so through a series of family missions each week, and then the kids see other kids, right? They oftentimes don't go up to each other and say, hey, do you have ADHD? No, they don't initiate those conversations. But here in this supportive environment, they get to see and hear from other kids who are just like them, and they're like, huh, I didn't know that, that, right? And so it helps normalize it for everybody.
Oh my goodness, I am so excited. Now I have to tell you that I'm overly excited about hearing you call their ADHD a superpower.
Yeah.
That's one, that's just one avenue that I absolutely love to teach from. Is now we're going to teach you how to create make your superpower out of this. So we're going to say, and if you pay attention, when we watch any of the series for our superheroes, what you find is there's a problem area, there's a struggle area, or some kind of thing they have to overcome in their journey. And this is what all builds up to how they get to their superpower. So it's the same concept. And this is absolutely wonderful. This wraparound approach where you're working with both the children and the parents, and you're not just focusing on the identified patient. Oh, let's get the child in treatment. They need, all this. There's so much support that's lacking out there for the parents. So this is really exciting.
Yeah. And then at the end of that 8 weeks, I tell the kids to go back and show off everything they've learned to their general pediatrician or their family physician, and they will be ready to craft an ADHD care plan. And, I feel like it's not early, you can never start early enough with teaching kids how to self-advocate for themselves, because parents can't do that all the time. They're not always going to be with them. But if you help give them that that knowledge about ADHD and not being afraid of it, and talk to them about the different things, ask them their opinions, like they have opinions, and, and encourage them to speak up. That's what we want.
Oh, that's so awesome. And you're teaching them so young. This is important. Most of the time the kids don't get to the self-advocacy piece until they're teenagers often.
That's right.
And it's so important to teach them early, because by the time they become teenagers, they've actually kind of formed a belief that they don't, they're not heard. That the way that they feel is not valid. So, this is so exciting. Now, can you tell me a little bit more about some of the tools that you've created through the Teach Me ADHD?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I really advocate in the class is just learning that, ADHD, your brain works a certain way. So you need to have things visual. You need to have things broken down into baby steps. Like, for instance, during the course, so we have a supply box that we mail to families, and each box has 9 different bags that are labeled with the week. You can't open it until the day of, because obviously I don't want kids to lose things that they need week to week, but it has all the supplies they need to do the family missions. Some of the things, like for instance, that we give are things like this: laminated things for an activity tracker, laminated mood tracker, and then also things like medicine tracker, right? We teach kids to be able to start, thinking about what it is that they need to be doing, but teach them in child-friendly ways. So yes, I do have a PowerPoint, but each PowerPoint slide has one word on it, and we talk about it, and it has graphics and images, and we talk about, well, how can we, take what we learned today and apply it to something, a new skill. And we talk about habit forming. We talk about goals, goal setting, how to communicate effectively with your parents. And we talk about, and we learn all about like emotion control, and we learn about different things. So another thing that, the kids put together are these visual cue cards. So we learn these different strategies, but they learn that, they need things visual. But again, the boxes have all of these activities in it, and we just introduce it in a way that makes it tangible to kids. And because parents are listening, they're expected to do these activities with their kids and then continue that conversation after the class.
Wow, that is so cool. Oh my goodness, you guys have so much good stuff. I mean, seriously, I may be moving to India. No, but now you brought up the emotional piece, how working
Yes.
on something more about emotional regulation. Let's talk a little bit about that, because often people that's one of the elements that people tend to miss associated with ADHD. So can you talk a little bit to us about ADHD and emotions?
Yeah, and we talk a lot about this just because, well, in general, one of the things that I often teach families, including the kids, is that we learn about that ADHD is much more than a behavioral diagnosis. I mean, if you have seen any of what we call the Vanderbilt forms, which are the traditional first line screeners that you would fill out if you go to a pediatrician's office. A lot of those behaviors are the core symptoms of ADHD, but they're the things that you can see, right? So it's like always on the go, blurting out answers, careless mistakes, looks like they're daydreaming, those kinds of things, right? But on the inside, we know that it's a brain-based condition, and kids with ADHD struggle with executive functions. So organization, prioritization, task initiation, emotion regulation, right? Sustaining attention. And so that emotion piece really is a big part of ADHD. However, we also know that kids with ADHD, they're super smart, but because executive functions are often lagging, it can be really frustrating for a 10-year-old who's smart, but because they have ADHD and they're lagging in emotion regulation or, organization, prioritization, they get super frustrated, right?
Yeah.
And I often have to remind parents in individual appointments, because oftentimes they'll bring that discussion like, oh, it's so stressful. I don't know why he's doing this. And I always have to remind parents, it's not necessarily that they're doing it on purpose, right?
Right.
They really are struggling. And so we have to reframe how we approach those situations. I know it's stressful. I know it. I know it to be true. But we need to be able to meet them where they are. I always, a good analogy to remember is, like the first time the child walked. We never yelled at them for falling on the ground. No,
Right.
we instead were like, hey, you can do it, you can do it. So really adopting that mindset, that coaching mindset, and really just kind of seeing where they are and then helping them move forward.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So awesome. Oh my goodness. Okay. So I do want to jump in and start to talk a little bit about our, because our theme of the month is our women and girls with ADHD. Now, are there any, hold on. Let's hold off on that question. I think we might have a question from the audience that I can't see.
Yeah. So it's from Kathy Harrison. She's watching us on YouTube. And her question is, are there any remedies for parents that are raising children that scream? Yes, I am talking in particular about children with trauma and ADHD. Thank you, Kathy, for your amazing question.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. Well, as with anything, a behavior is a behavior, right? So oftentimes as a clinician, what I need to know is to know the specifics of when that behavior shows up, to really start understanding the context of that behavior. That's why the detective theme is so important, because I tell kids and parents that we need to start tracking their behavior and understanding how their brain works, right? And so they are never in trouble for it. But I need to understand where they're struggling. And so a child who is screaming, what was happening right before? What was the antecedent, the trigger? What does the screaming look like? How long does it last? Is it in public? Is it only with a certain caregiver? Is it across different environments? All that information is important. And then how does the caregiver respond, or the consequence of the behavior, right? So when I understand and look for trends, that can really start helping me understand what the function of the screaming is. Is it, is it because the child is traumatized and something is triggering, like PTSD or anxiety? And again, sometimes anxiety can be triggered by things that we can't see immediately, or a past lived experience. And so as parents, we're trying to, move from A to B to C, and sometimes life is busy. And when your child is like, screaming, you're like, what is going on, right? And it's really stressful for everybody. So I would say, Kat, that the answer to that question is not really easy, but I think the first thing is to really start tracking that behavior, and what I said, the ABCs of behavior, so that we can understand the patterns there, and then really starting to dig deeper into why that child is screaming. At the same time, right, we need to stay calm as much as possible.
Yeah. Now, this is excellent stuff, because this is where, as soon as I saw the question, I thought about it, and I was like, okay, the formula for that, because in the work with hypersensitive children that I do, it's all trauma, ADHD, autism, all these things. There's a certain formula that I created, the 4 steps of the Lafaya way, and you can remember that by FUR. And now this is just piggybacking off of some of what Dr. Bauer said, because with a FUR, the F in FUR, and this is a long R, by the way. So the F in FUR is find your calm, is one. And the reason for this is because there is a dynamic that happens for children who are hypersensitive that I call emotion soaking. Okay, so if there's anything negative energy, anyone's upset, and this is not a blame thing, this is just of course it's going to be upsetting when we're having certain interactions and screamers and that kind of thing. But most important step is to understand that the kids who do get very agitated, very upset easily, they tend to be soaking in all of what's going on around them in their environments. So this is what I call the 6th sense. So they have sensory issues, and what we tend to not address is that 6th sense, which is the drawing from other people's feeling energies. So with that said, when you work towards finding your calm, the U in FUR, which is understanding the real truth, which Dr. Bauer spoke to so wonderfully, understanding the real truth helps. What are some of the triggers for you? Are you upset before you come to them? Can you do a self check-in or a check-in for them? The HALT from the 12 steps program, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Is there a potential for them to be any of those things? Am I any of those things, and bringing negative energy to the table, right? So then once you get to find your calm by understanding the real truth, then you go into our next R, which is responding in alignment with your truest intentions. When you respond in alignment with your truest intentions, that means what is it that you wanted in the interaction in the first place? What is your end? What would you like to see from your child? And then you want to respond from that. Now, if we say we look at our core values and we think, oh, okay, well, what I really want around my home is just peace in my home. What I want is for my child to feel confident and, happy and, understood and all of that. Then sometimes some of our actions aren't quite in alignment with that. Okay, so you want to start to work on having responses that are, and some of the things that I use to try to help with that are I like to call it my power talk formula. And it's basically, hey, when you do this, it causes this disruption. And I know that's not your intention, so please try to do it this way. Like, use your tools, right? And then we get into our 3 R's after that. I'm trying to move through really fast, but then you get to your 3 R's after that. And that is to make sure that, first of all, you're recognizing small step differences. Because when you have a screamer, that means there's a high level of anxiety. There's higher levels of lots of things going on for them. So we're looking for small step improvements in these children. So you have to recognize those first and foremost. This is how you keep the longevity. You reinforce those highly, and then you make sure you're always repeating the 3 steps. And when you're following this formula, then you tend to get incrementally better results with our most hypersensitive kids.
Yes,
So
I love that. I love that. What a great way to remember those steps and really bring in what I call positive parenting, techniques and strategies is
yes,
because
yes,
we know that relational health is so key to so much of the things that we're seeing, the adversity, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and toxic stress. And we know that it can cause physiologic changes in the body, right? When kids are chronically stressed from whatever it is, living in poverty, being exposed to violence, harsh punishment, or whatever, these things the kids soak up their environment, just like you said, and we need to know what is going on. So, again, I love what you just said. The screaming is a symptom, and we really need to do kids service by really peeling back the onion layer and trying to understand what is underlying that.
yes. That's the tops. Like
Yes.
we can get a true understanding. It helps in every other area. And if we start responding in accordance to that understanding, oh my goodness, it just makes it makes a world of difference for both you
Yes.
and the child.
Yeah, we need
So
to work together. I mean,
I know. I already know. I said I'm coming to Indiana. I'm ready. I'm ready. No, seriously, you are so awesome. I'm so excited about all the things that you're talking about right now. But okay, so I really hope that was helpful to you. But we're gonna just use our last couple of minutes to have you talk about our last few minutes to talk about our girls and ADHD and some of the differences that you're seeing. How they're impacted. Some of the difference between them and our guys.
yeah, so I don't want to overgeneralize, but
Right.
with ADHD, there are 3 different types of ADHD: the hyperactive impulsive subtype, the inattentive subtype, and then combined subtype, which means that you basically have both of those different types of symptoms. There are 2 peaks in the identification of ADHD. So typically, preschool, you're welcome, Kathy. Preschool kids, tend to be the ones that are more disruptive, hyperactive, impulsive. They come to the attention of pediatricians sooner. A lot of them happen to be male. Not
Yep.
all, but male. And then, kind of grade 3 to 4, you're not just learning to read, you're reading to learn. And there's a lot of kids that are inattentive that come out at that second wave. But women and girls in particular are a little bit more tricky because a lot of and again, generalization, but girls in particular, can be very eager to please, perfectionistic. They don't want to have, they compensate for that inattentive, a lot. And a lot of kids with ADHD also have comorbid anxiety. And so a lot of these girls sometimes can slip through the cracks. So what it really means is that, again, that's why pediatricians are really nice first liners, because they have that ongoing relationship through the years and really get to know the child and the parent and the family. Even if they have shorter visits, they can really kind of start to see, how things are evolving. So, sometimes, unfortunately, girls can be underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed, and they can slip through the cracks. They're not diagnosed till later sometimes. But again, if you have a concern, you or your child, please do not hesitate to bring your discussion to your pediatrician or your provider, because that will always open the door to at least start investigating whether there is, something there that needs to be worked up.
Now, can I ask just one final question about our girl? Do you find that the girls tend towards being more emotionally impacted by ADHD than the guys are?
In different ways. And again, this is kind of more generalizations, but I think in general, kids who are hyperactive impulsive, they tend to hear, no, why you're doing that. They often get sent to the principal. They might get excluded from school early. So there's a lot of kind of the negative thoughts that go around that, just hearing a lot of no and all of that. With girls, right, because they're internalizing it more, and a lot of them are perfectionists. So, again, we learn in my Teach Me ADHD class about automatic negative thoughts or ants, and we learn about how to begin to identify those and separate ourselves from those ants, notice those thoughts, but then being able to change our emotions that we associate with those feelings. Because unfortunately, these kids are struggling. They know it too. And so they oftentimes feel like, I'm stupid. I can't do it. Why can't, why is it so hard for me and everybody else can do it? Why am I so disorganized? Why do I get in trouble all the time? Why can't I remember stuff? So oftentimes these thoughts just become ingrained in their heads, and we really, really need to be able to teach kids that emotion vocabulary, regardless of how early it comes out in relation to either that hyperactive impulsive behavior or that inattentive behavior, and that esteem issue starts coming out.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're out of time, but oh my goodness, we have to have more conversation together. Because
Yes.
I'm so just about. You open up a whole new can of worms when we talk about the kids and the self-esteem, and I just have to throw out this one last piece where I just want parents to understand how important it is to make sure we speak to, and I think Dr. Bauer says the same thing, speak to their strengths, speak to the superpower portion, because what we want to do is we want to feed the things that we want more of.
Mm-hmm.
We want to starve the things we want less of. So if you see a deficit, it's not that you just ignore and act like it doesn't exist, but how about let's look at how do we move into a positive direction with this? Since I know this is my challenge, how do I move into a positive direction, as opposed to, oh, this is terrible and I'm such a terrible person, or, and that kind of thing. Moving out of that challenge focus and more into that solutions focus.
Yes.
So it was so wonderful to have you, Dr. Bauer. You're a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much. You're so awesome. And thank you everyone out there for joining us. I hope that you had a wonderful time. And we're going to go ahead and close this up because we're over now. But until next time, stay you and stay true.